Hi guys, this is Millie Clark here, coming to you from balmy Canberra. I'm a Olympic marathon runner, a dietitian and an avid pug lover, and you are listening to the Physical Performance Show.
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go. Welcome to another episode of the Physical Performance Show, brought to you by Physio and Pogo Physio. I'm Brad Beer, sports physiotherapist by trade and training, and founder of Pogo Physio. Each week, we'll aim to bring you the latest and greatest information, the highs, lows, and learnings of our guests to help you perform at your physical best. We do this across a range of episodes, including interest editions, expert editions, featured performer episodes, and also Coach's Corner episodes. And on today's episode, episode 180, I bring you a conversation that I recently had with Australian distance running star Millie Clark. In addition to Millie sharing her career highs, lows, and learnings, we also discuss Millie's profession as a dietitian, working at Physio TAS in Tasmania. Millie brings the great mix of professional athletes' insights and also a health professional's insights to all things physical best performance, health, and well-being. By way of bio, Millie's running career spans a decade plus, and Millie ran her first official marathon in 2015 in Amsterdam, where she qualified for the 2016 Rio Olympic Games representing Australia. At Millie's first Olympic Games in 2016, she placed 18th, and leading into 2020, the Tokyo Olympic Games, Millie firmly has her sights on becoming a dual Australian Olympian. At the 2019 Gold Coast Marathon, Millie ran a fantastic race, chasing down the eventual winner, Kenyan Rhoda Jepkora. And quite amazingly, at the 35-kilometre mark, Millie was 1 minute and 31 seconds behind the leader. But by the time Millie crossed the line, she had closed that gap to 12 seconds, running a very swift 2:28.08 to become Millie's marathon PB, and also clocking a Tokyo Olympic Games qualifier. In addition to the marathon success, Millie is the 2012 Australian 3,000 metre steeplechase champion and also the Australian 10,000 metre champion from 2014. Elite sport seems to be in Millie's blood, with her aunt a former Olympic diver and her mother Margaret having competed in the 1978 Commonwealth Games as a gymnast. Millie completed her master's degree in nutrition from the University of Sydney, and you'll hear some fantastic insights from Millie today around fueling for marathons, the challenges with disordered eating amongst recreational, competitive and elite distance runners. We continue the conversation having started from several episodes ago around energy availability for endurance athletes, and as usual, Millie survives a performance round and also issues a fantastic physical challenge for the week. Oh, and just before we kick off today's episode, if you tuned in expecting Australian 800 metre track star Joseph Deng, then stay put. We will bring you that episode. We needed to slightly change the schedule to bring you a Millie Clark today. So here is my conversation with Millie Clark, the highs, lows, and learnings. Millie Clark, this is a thrill to catch up with you as you prepare for the Doha World Athletics Championships for the marathon. So welcome to the Physical Performance Show.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
As we always do, let's start with something a little bit fun, and that is, what's one thing that you are learning at the moment?
Oh my goodness. Actually, well, I suppose it's not even running related. I recently got a new job lecturing and tutoring at UTAS, the uni, so I'm just learning how to be, a really good kind of tutor and I guess role model for the kind of older uni student age and kind of share my knowledge there. So it's been a bit of a learning curve and learning process, but it's fun.
And on that, you are an accredited dietitian, and you can be found at the Tasmanian Institute of Sport. So this has been quite a parallel journey, I guess, with you. The theme of this show is helping people perform at their physical best. So you've been pursuing that with your own endeavours, but also professionally. The knowledge certainly has accrued along the way as well.
Yeah, it's come in handy. I mean, I originally got into, dietetics to actually learn more about the human body and learn more about myself, and then it just ended up going from an interest to a career. So it was really, really good to have that, be able to use what I know kind of in my own running.
Yeah, and hasn't it helped you of late with your incredible Gold Coast Marathon performance in July in 2019? 2:28. So the sky's the limit.
I'm still learning. That's the cool thing, is that the cool thing with nutrition and science is there's always new info coming out and new studies being done. And so there's always the opportunity to learn something or try something different. And yeah, that's just the really cool thing about it. Two races are the same, really.
Have you, Millie, you said new things coming out. Is there anything that you have been experimenting with of late?
Yeah, I suppose prior to my first marathon, I really played around with the whole high-fat, low-carb kind of diet. Played around a bit with that. But before this Gold Coast Marathon, I tried more with kind of higher carb diet, and so I think that's proof's in the pudding there. It was paid dividends, really.
Yeah, and so when was your first marathon, Millie?
2015 in Amsterdam.
How did that play out for you? You said you tried a high fat, low carb approach in the lead in. So what was that debut like?
It was it was really good. The course was awesome. It was dead flat. It was cold. Amsterdam was really pretty to look at. I did the whole kind of, I guess you'd call it periodized approach, where on your harder days, you'd eat more kind of carbohydrates, and on my easier runs, I'd just eat, high-fat foods. And then I did the whole carb load before, which I'd never done before, and that was interesting. By the time I was done, I didn't want to look at another piece of bread ever again. But, yeah, I think I had a good enough balance. I mean, I did a 2:29 first up and really surprised myself. So I just think there's more than one way to skin a cat, and that worked for me at the time, but I wouldn't do it again.
Yeah, and certainly, I mean, I'm a sports physio. I'm not a dietitian, but the intensity that you're running at as an elite level performer is certainly not a fat burning zone percentage of VO2 max, is it?
No. And then when I found out, someone's like, no, you need to run your marathons at 85% VO2. I was like, oh, okay, so fat's not really going to work here.
It's interesting. However, if you were, going to be, coming across the line, say 4 or 5 hours, it may have a valid place, mightn't it? So, Millie, let's rewind the clock. How did a young Millie Clark find her way into a pair of running shoes?
Oh, it was probably way back when I was 4 years old. It was kind of I suppose it was a cool story. I'd gone to the grocery shop with my mum one day, and we were leaving the grocery shop, and when you're a little kid and you kind of hold on to your parents' hand to cross the road. So we're crossing the road to get back to the car, and for some reason I just let go of her hand and started running across the road to the car, and nearly got cleaned up by this car coming the other way, and I managed to run, dodged it. Mum was distraught, but when we got home, she was telling the story to Dad, and he goes, righto, she was born to run. So the next weekend, I remember we went down to Little Athletics, and since that day, I've probably run almost, I reckon, every single day of my life. I loved it from, those Little Athletics days. They were my favourite, and something that I've just always done.
What's the love affair with it now? After all these years, what do you still love about running?
I think I love that it's, and it might sound a bit weird, but I love that it's something that, I can I can control, and there's so many variables, but at the end of the day, you can play around with so many different things to get the best out of yourself, and I just love being able to really challenge myself and find, some balance. And it's like my rock, wherever I am in the world, whatever I'm doing, I can always rely on, I can just go for a run, clear my head. It's one of those things that, with so many uncontrollables, it's the one thing in my life I feel like I can control. And, my performance comes down to me and what I do and the choices I make. And I think that's what I really love about it.
It's very pure, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think in a dietetic sense, input, output.
Yeah.
But did you have any team sports or any other sports that sort of were of any interest to you while you were that young growing girl, or was it always about running?
No, I did heaps of things, and I think that's probably what's helped me the most in my career. Is up until I didn't really specialise until I was about 21. I played basketball. I loved basketball. I did gymnastics quite competitively until I was about 16. And, my mum was a gymnast and dad was a runner. So they were like, ooh, you got to pick one to kind of focus on. And so I had to let gymnastics go. But, I did rugby and played around with soccer. I was terrible at soccer, so I was usually just standing in the goal. I was a goalie. But I did love basketball, and I tried most sports, but I always did running. And I think, running's one of those things where no matter what sport you do, you do run in it. Like soccer, you run. Basketball, you run. You do the vault in gym, you run. So it always comes back to running, really.
And so does that mean you can attribute your genes 100% to your father, the runner, because mum was a gymnast?
No, I like to think that it's a combination of all family genetics.
Of course.
I can't favour one over the other, but yeah, look, I think I've been blessed with sporty genes, whatever that means. So
brilliant. And Millie, before we move on to career highs and lows, was there a moment where your confidence and your belief in yourself really emerged throughout your developing years? I mean, you said you started to specialise from 21, which I guess for many would be deemed as late. We know through literature and research that early specialisation sometimes handicaps athletic potential rather than boost. Obviously, it depends. So was there a moment where you went, you know what, I think I've really got a gift here and I can experience some great levels? Yeah,
I think when I moved to Germany when I was 11, and I had a lot of success at little athletics and I'd always won state titles and state records. But when I moved over to Germany and started going to school there, I went on at the athletic school carnival and just against heaps of European countries. We competed against Austria and places in The Hague and London, and I ended up winning all of the European kind of things. And I thought, oh, hang on a second, this is a bit bigger than Tassie, and it was just something that was kind of, that seed was planted from when I was 11, and I didn't want to just specialise, but I did feel confident that I could do something with running if I wanted to. So having that success overseas early really just gave me a taste for it and helped motivate me later on just to keep pursuing it.
And were you dreaming about the Olympics young in years? Obviously you made your debut in Rio in 2016.
Oh yeah, I remember watching 92 and 96 Olympics, with my dad, with the little black and white TV, and I thought, oh man, I'd love to be there. And it was weird because I was really into my sprinting back then, so we'd watch, people like Lauren Hewitt, and I really looked up to Jana Pittman and wanted to be a 400 hurdler, and I just remember watching them and being like, I'd just love to be there one day. And it was weird how I ended up at the marathon, but hey, here we are.
And Millie, if you had to, rate your highest or greatest or most meaningful achievement to yourself to date athletically, what would it be and why?
I actually think it would be the World Half Marathon Champs in Cardiff I did back in 2016. It was the first Australian team I ever went on. I kind of went in there not really, I had absolutely no idea what it was like to run on the world stage, pull on the Australian uniform, be in the call room with all the Kenyans and just be in that mix. I had no idea what that was like, and I didn't really know what to expect, and the weather was crap and it was raining and it was cold, and I was like, oh, here we go. And anyway, I ended up finishing 13th and did a 3-minute PB and was right behind Eloise Wellings at the time, and I just thought I had really surprised myself, and I felt really proud that I'd worked really hard to get there, and I didn't just want to have the singlet. I wanted to really compete, and after I did that, I just got a lot more confident in my abilities, especially in high pressure situations like that.
So that was a real a turning point of belief by the sounds.
Yeah, for sure. And it really, the buzz that you get when you cross the finish line, in the Aussie kit, it's like I can't really describe what that feels like, but that's kind of the feeling that I just chase now, because it was so meaningful and just felt so good at that time.
And from there, you've really just gone on from strength to strength, but dare say there's so much more. Your current PBs on the road, Millie, where do they sit for the 10, the half, and the full?
My 10 is average. My 10K is one race that I just it's like my Achilles heel. I don't know, I'm not the greatest at 10K. That's something that I need to work on. It's low 33s. It's not amazing, but my half is a 70. I don't know where that puts me. I guess similar position as a marathon. So it's kind of like up in the top 5 or 6 around Australia, but there's definitely lots of work to be done with those. I'm still learning a lot. As I said, I've only really been competing on the road since I was about 25. I'm still relatively new, and I think that I've still got a fair bit to go and learn.
Certainly we're seeing now, aren't we, Millie, the maturation of women marathoners, particularly in Australia. I mean, it's worldwide, obviously, but, some of your country women, Lisa Waitman and Sinead Diver, competing so well like yourself, and, they're into their 4th decade. So it's really exciting, I think, for upcoming athletes to know that there's just such a runway ahead, isn't there?
Oh, for sure. And I've always said, age is just a number. It's really about how you feel. I think, I could be 16 or 26 or 46, and, if it's all about the experience you've got in your legs, and the more experience you have, the better you're going to be, and the more adapted and easier it's going to be for you. So I think, I'll just keep chipping away, and whether I peak in next year or in the next 4 years, I do it because I love it, not for any other reason.
Yeah, no, beautiful. In terms of organising your training, getting ready for, say, the Gold Coast Marathon, what were some of the key headlines of training inclusions that you wanted to hit? Were you looking at how were you distributing your intensity across a week? What was your mileage like? What were some of the approaches you took to run so well on the Gold Coast?
I guess a combo of all of those. I swapped coaches about a year ago, a bit over a year ago. So I train I get coached by Philo Saunders now, and he'd never coached me for a marathon before, and because I was coming off an injury, I did a lot less mileage than what I have done in the past. I just didn't want to get injured again, and I didn't know where my body was at, and so we just made sure that every time I ran it was quality rather than just getting in the miles. So I dropped it back, and I only did sessions on Tuesday, Fridays, which I know doesn't fit like the Australian, gospel Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday sessions. But for me, it worked well. And Philo also coaches Michael Roger, who we followed the same template. So we found that the Tuesday, Friday sessions were big and intense, but it just gave us that opportunity on the other days to really recover. So I made my Friday session like my key session, and you would do, 5K reps or some longer kind of reps, and then a quality long run on Sunday, and then, a shorter, sharper session on a Tuesday. And for me, I found that worked brilliantly. I was always recovered. I felt fresh. I felt strong. I was able to hit all my splits. I think being able to train at that intensity I need was key for me, rather than just doing runs for the sake of, doing runs.
Yeah, so you backed off your mileage. What was some of your mileage like leading into Gold Coast, July 2019?
It was about, I think around 165-ish one. Maybe I would have gone to 170 on a couple of weeks, but it sat around in between that 160 170 mark, and I find that that's actually a sweet spot for me. I probably won't go higher than that anymore ever. I know that before Rio and Amsterdam I played around with some 190 200k weeks, but the quality wasn't there, so I think I'd rather cut back and have the quality rather than just focus too much on getting the numbers.
Well, the proof was in the pudding. What injury were you coming off, Millie?
I got 3 stress reactions in my foot. So one in my calcaneus, one in my metatarsal, and another in the cuboid. So all down the kind of right-hand side of my right foot and I was out for pretty much all of 2018. I didn't race, and that was really, really tough. So we had to play it really careful, because I got injured at the end of 2017 with a fracture in my calcaneus. Came back too quickly and then redid it early 2018. So, we really just had to make sure that I got the balance right this time and didn't do that again, because that was, talk about career lows. It's probably my lowest point, I reckon, thus far.
The upset or the fracture of your calcaneus coming back, because how many weeks into your return to loading program were you before you realised what had happened again with the calcaneus?
I actually did, and I did a cross-country race, and I thought, I'm all good here, and then 2 weeks later it was kaput. So I don't think I did that reload properly. I wasn't with Philo at the time, and I'd never been injured before, so I didn't really know. I just thought, okay, I'll wait 6 weeks and then I'll just run again.
So you came back pretty hard and fast, so to speak.
Yeah, that's not how it works. I do know now, though. This time was a long return to run, but I worked with a really good physio down at home in Tassie, and he said, "You'll thank me. I promise. When you do a marathon, you'll thank me for taking it easy." And I said, "Oh, okay."
And here you are. And did you thank your physio? I'm sure you did.
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Of course, one of your workmates, Millie. In terms of how long that did take, so can you remember your first run? You were probably walking, and then how many months was it before you were back at the volume that you felt you needed to be? I think this can just really encourage people that are coming back from bone stress injuries. When was it?
So I started probably running. I had the goal that I would run 1st of January 2019 and be running every day on the 1st of January. That didn't quite happen. So around, I reckon, mid-January of this year, I actually started to run every day, and that was after starting to run in November. So I'd spent almost 2.5 months of a return to run program before I was actually running every day. And then I reckon it was after the Canberra half marathon, so April, where I was actually doing volumes that I was happy with again. So that's, almost 6 months that it took me to get to a place where I felt comfortable running and I felt fit again.
Yeah, and there is some great insight from someone that's doing it so well, but we all learn from our mistakes in coming back sometimes from bone stress injuries, myself included, Millie. So well done to you, Millie. Before we jump into a performance round, with your professional knowledge and your running career, one of the things that I see as such a major consideration for both the male and female endurance athlete is this concept of energy availability. So ensuring that our training isn't occurring at the cost of good health. So for women, things like menstruation cycles, bone health, which is the same for men. So What have you found over your running career to date, morphed with your dietetic professional knowledge, are the keys with ensuring energy balance for endurance athletes, be that the pointy end of town like yourself or the recreationally competitive or the beginner?
Yeah, look, I think everyone, and everyone's different, everyone's got a different body comp. Everyone, experiences, I guess, the highs and lows of training. But I think what matters the most is how I actually feel running, how you actually recover. I think recovery is the best indication of whether you're eating enough and how you feel kind of, over the weeks. Are you feeling sluggish, tired, run down? I think that's when you're really setting yourself up for injury. And I usually use that as a guide now. I'm just super paranoid after being injured for that I don't, sacrifice my health at the cost of, performance. And I think if the human body is, I don't like I get a lot of clients that come in and, they talk about getting to a race weight, and I don't know where that's come from or why that's such a big deal. I think if you're running well and you're performing to your best and your body's healthy, why does it matter what race weight you're at? Like that, I hate that. And I try to move people away from that as best as possible. I think naturally your body goes up and down in composition depending on, what you're doing and what's coming up and the temperature and your living situation and, what you've got on at work. But I'll never follow a race weight or, purposely try to get lean for a race. I think that's absolutely ridiculous and certainly not healthy at all.
Where do you think that mindset of trying to hit a race weight comes from? Because you see this in not just elite performers but also recreational runners? Yeah. I see it a lot in a lot of triathletes at the moment. I don't know why. It just seems to be people want to drop 2 or 3 kilos before they race. And I say, but, if you're training well at the moment, why do anything different just because you have to race? And I guess it's just come from, way back, previous, runners and things. Historically, people just think that works. And I think there's a difference between males and females. I think males can do that a bit more, whereas females, there's a lot more riding on that. There's a lot more risk involved with dropping to a lower weight for females in terms of, their reproductive health and health in general, whereas there's not as much risk for males. So I don't know, why females want to play around with that. I think it's dangerous and certainly not something that I encourage at all. We've featured on an expert edition Trent Stellingworth from Canada with his work in relative energy deficiency syndrome, and it's it can really have some serious health implications. And merely the thing that jumps out that I recall from Trent's sharings were that if an athlete's in 100 calories, Trent's based in Canada, deficit per day, an endurance athlete times 365 days, that's 100,000 calories a year, which is like not eating for a month. And you would never, no one would ever do that.
No, absolutely not. And I think I've learned a lot just through my experience what happens if I don't eat enough and what happens if I don't get the right fluids. Or I got the biggest shock when I went to altitude. I didn't realise that, you need to almost double your intake of food when you're away at altitude because, you're just doing so much more extra work. And I think those are things that you learn along the way, but it's something that I do try to, teach people or tell people myself now just because I think it's so important to be aware and to know all of those things.
Yeah, look, some great insights there, Millie. I also think of Ryan Hall, who I recall here in Ryan's state that he used to look at the Kenyans and some of the East Africans and think, I've got to drop lighter, I've got to drop a few kilos to look like them. And when he did, he ran nowhere near his best. And when he didn't worry about it and just ran at his natural state, he was so much better for it.
And I think the thing is that younger female runners especially, there's so much going on with until you're, 25, 30, your body's still developing. And, the problem is you get these 16, 17-year-old girls who look at, some of the older females who have finished developing, their hormones have all balanced out. And then once you're older, you start to naturally get lean. especially as a female, your body starts to adapt. Whereas when you're 16, 17, to be that lean it's not right, and it's not healthy and it's not natural. But I think it's, as you get older, your body does start to go through those adaptations, and, you know, females do become more efficient than they are at, you know, 15, 16, 17, those early 20s. So I think, you know, if you're carrying a bit more weight when you're 20, 21, by the time you're 30, at least you're in a better position to prevent injury, and your bones are in a good position, you know, once 30 to become leaner.
Millie, you know, you mentioned bone health, and certainly as a physiotherapist, any runner that presents with stress reactions or bone stress injuries, more particularly a history of them, you know, it's something that as a practitioner I certainly weigh up, is I wonder what their bone health status is like. And you mentioned the importance of not looking at the scales to hit a race weight, but, you know, just trying to stay healthy and not overregulate that. One of the concerns, and as you said, there's this fixation with trying to often be lean, and that can, I find, sometimes drive some disordered eating, you know, with some real concerns there with people's eating habits or restrictions. So from your professional vantage point, Millie, can you speak to that in terms of the endurance athlete that's developing into the developed endurance athlete?
Yeah, so, I mean, I've seen a couple of younger girls lately, athletes who, you know, their parents have brought them in concerned, you know, that they've gotten some blood tests back. Or I saw a girl who's had, this is her fourth stress fracture, and she's only 16. And I think, you know, what are you doing here? What is your body trying to tell you? You know, and I think sometimes if parents aren't actually invested in their children, it can just go unnoticed. Like, parents don't realise how big of an influence they play, because some of these girls, like, don't even realise that maybe they do have a disordered eating pattern, or maybe it's not normal to have not menstruated when you're 16 and it's a bit late, and you still should be in a position to be able to do that. And so I think the parents probably play a crucial role, especially for the younger athlete, in picking up on those kinds of things, and knowing that having 4 stress fractures by the time you're 16 isn't normal, and it shouldn't be happening. We shouldn't, unless you've got a seriously bad running form, or, you know, there's something technically wrong. It's really down to your energy availability. I think there's no other explanation for it. And I mean, I've gone 30 years without an injury, and I think it's based on good nutrition as, you know, a young female. All through my teens, all through my early 20s, I've set myself up to be in a good position to handle the higher training loads now.
Yeah. No, look, thanks for going there. It's obviously a sensitive area, but it's one that does need discussion, particularly when it comes to developing athletes.
Yeah, it's tricky because they don't, like, as I said, they look up to some of the older athletes, you know, and they're all older. They're all, you know, 10, 15 years older, and their bodies had time to go through those changes and make those adaptations. And, you know, it is what it is. And I look at, you know, some of the older athletes eat on a day. There's a huge amount of food, and yet they're still lean, and that's not what they choose to. It's just how your body adapts over time. So it's a really hard thing for young females to accept that, okay, maybe I'm not lean when I'm 16, but at least, you know, I'm going to be better for it when I'm 26, kind of thing. I think that's the hardest thing and to get across.
That's really, really great, you know, to take that longer term view. When I recall Trent Stellingworth stating that, Millie, the athletes with the best energy balance are the leanest.
Yeah.
But that doesn't come through caloric restriction. That comes through years of training in the bank and that lean muscle mass development. So well done.
Yeah.
You're listening to Millie Clark, featured performer, 2016 Australian Olympic marathoner, sharing around her highs, lows, and learnings. Support for today's show comes from Physio Creme. Physio Creme is a topical massage cream containing natural plant-based ingredients, ideal for the temporary relief of muscular aches and pains. If you're conscious of what you put on your body, you'll be happy to know that Physio Creme does not contain parabens or hydroxybenzoates, and its non-greasy formula doesn't leave any sticky residue behind. Physio Creme can be found Australia-wide at your local Coles, chemist or health store, as well as via their online store. Physio Creme have generously offered up 20% off all Physio Creme products for listeners of the Physical Performance Show. Simply jump over to physiocreme.com.au, that's FISIOCREM.com.au, to redeem the Physical Performance Show offer. And remember, hurting sucks, but Physio Creme have got your back. Support for today's show also comes from Pogo Physio. We exist to help you get back to your physical best following injury. We want everyone who walks through the doors of Pogo Physio to complete their rehabilitation, get back to their physical best, and in doing so, cross the physio finish line. To find out more about Pogo Physio's award-winning services, including our popular telehealth consultations, which allow people anywhere in the world to connect with our physiotherapists for their rehabilitation journey, jump over to pogophysio.com.au. For now, let's jump back with Millie Clark, this week's featured performer, sharing on her career highs, lows, and learnings. Millie, let's do a performance round. Are you ready?
Oh, I think so. I hope so.
Millie Clark, training session most disliked?
800 reps.
How many are we talking?
10.
With what recovery?
I usually do it on like a 4-minute cycle.
And what sort of times are you hitting?
Look, on a good day, 228s. On an average day, I'd struggle to get 236. But I don't know why. I really hate 800s. They are my Achilles heel.
And you mean Olympic representatives have bad days as well?
Oh yeah. Look, to be honest, I spend less time looking at the clock than anybody else. I rarely put a clock on. I just run by feel. So I think I'm running along and I always think to myself, does this hurt? Yep, okay, I'm pushing hard enough.
Does it hurt? I'm pushing hard enough. Well said. Training session most loved?
It would probably have to be, I really love 2K reps or 1K reps. Really love those because I can really get into a good rhythm.
And how many are we talking, Millie?
Yeah, usually around 2K reps. Usually I'll do 4 or 5. If I do 1Ks, I'll be, the typical 8 to 10. Yeah, I used to love running for minutes, but now I think I love running for distance. So they seem to work well.
Favourite pre-race meal?
I just love white rice. I grew up in Asia and I love rice with salt on it.
And that's the night before or the morning of, or?
It's mostly the night before. I'm not a huge eat before I run person, so I'll usually have dinner and then I'll have something like right before I go to sleep so that I'm all topped up. And then in the morning, I'll have a coffee or something if I need to, but I try to take care of everything so that I'd rather get more sleep than rush to wake up and shove something in.
So interesting. And that white rice, just going back on that, just if I did hear correctly, it's just white rice and salt.
Yeah, pretty much.
And extra salt, lots of salt?
I don't know. I love salty things. Just whatever's going, whatever I feel like.
And any dietetic words of advice about salt, for the endurance athlete? Millie, I love, former guest of the show, Peter Bruckner, who said we waged war on the wrong white crystal, which never should have been about reducing salt.
100% agree. Yeah, I'm all for the salt. I think that's the reason we actually get cramps is not because of magnesium, it's because of low sodium. So any athlete who's, avoiding salt, I go, but why? Just put it everywhere. There's the reason that they invented those, the salt sticks and things like that. It's because, we sweat out predominantly sodium, and so we need to replace that. And I love salt.
I had a moment of awakening after decades of endurance sport. In the 2015 New York Marathon, I developed rhabdomyolysis and was in a bit of a mess. And, I couldn't figure out. It was a 9-degree day, and I ended up in a whole heap. And, then I realised that I've always been a really high salt excreter, and I actually, ran into dehydration problems because of my high salt excretion. And ever since, I've supplemented with salt, but I was really impressed. The Americans were talking about salt loading all leading into the New York Marathon. It's make sure you got enough salt. And I thought, how contrasted to Australia, where you never really hear that message.
No, you definitely don't. And I got my sweat test done before Gold Coast because I was worried about the kind of heat up there coming from Tassie winter, to humidity. And I found out I don't sweat very much in terms of fluid, but I'm probably like you in that I sweat out a lot of sodium. So I knew that, when I came to make my drinks, I put more. I guess they're more concentrated with sodium rather than rather worry about getting in the liquid. I just needed the salt.
How much salt did you put in your drinks for Gold Coast?
I think I sweated out. It was something like 1,900 milligrams per litre or something. So I just tried to make sure that over the course of, the hour, I was getting that through my drinks.
Yeah, and were you doing your own custom drinks or off the shelf stuff? Yep.
Yeah, no, I was fortunate enough to be able to use my own things that I'm comfortable with and that I train with, and it works for me, so I'll never change it.
Millie, we went on a tangent, but a good one. Back on the performance round, who's the athlete that Millie Clark most admires and why?
I actually really love, she's American, Desi Linden. I don't know if you know.
Yep.
I think she's got a really good balance. She doesn't place, she trains hard, she works hard, she's got a really good attitude towards running. She's, not every day is going to be world records, but just keep showing up, keep putting in the work. It's all about the consistency over time rather than being a training ground hero. She enjoys a good beer or two, which I'm definitely privy to myself, and I've always believed in having that balance and not putting any restrictions on. And she's got a bunch of dogs. I love my dogs, and I just think she's just really well-rounded, level-headed, humble, works hard, and she's a Boston Marathon winner. She's a 2:22 runner, and she started out running 2:44s and got herself down to 2:22. So I think to be able to have her life in balance and do that I aspire to that. I like that.
Yeah, wow, what a great role model. Millie, is there a mantra that you use when you race or compete?
Not really a mantra, but what I like to do is I just really love the sound of my feet hitting the road. I just like that sound, and so whenever I feel like it's getting tricky or getting harder, I'm feeling uncomfortable, I just try to listen to that, and I find that's really soothing and calming. It's not really a mantra, but it just helps me bring myself back into the race and my own space.
And it's very metronomic, isn't it? There's no variation.
Yeah, exactly. Yep, especially over 42Ks.
Millie Clark, best recovery tip?
Best recovery tip, I'd have to say, well, look, for me personally, it's just about getting good sleep, I reckon. I notice if I don't sleep well, I definitely feel worse for it. So, that's when we recharge and regenerate. So that for me is a biggie.
So would you ever cut your sleep short to make sure you got the extra time in on training, or it's a non-negotiable for you at the sleeps? To the best of your ability, the sleep's happening? No, I
don't think I'd ever cut a training short because of sleep, but I just will make sure that, the next day I'll get a nap in or something. I'm a huge fan of naps, and I heard that, 25 minutes is the golden rule, and I like or the golden number for a good nap. So I just think, look, if I don't have time to get 25 minutes of napping in, then, you haven't scheduled your day right. So I tried to, do that, and I'm a huge believer in that.
Do you have a set nap time, Millie? Like if we visited you at at your workplace there, we'd know that Millie's having a nap?
At the moment, I don't mind a good nap around like 3:30ish.
All right.
When most people are getting that like slump, I'll just tuck myself away for half an hour and recharge.
So no dietetic consults happening at that time.
I can avoid it. I avoid it.
That's good on you. And Millie, finally in the performance round, a bit of a fun one, but what's the hardest training session you've ever done?
It's not even like a long distance one. I remember when I used to do sprints, we used to have to run for a minute and see how far we got, and then you'd get 2 minutes rest and then you do it again, and if you didn't hit the cone or more, then you're out. And because I just hated not being able to reach the cone, I would just go and go and go and go and go and go, and I was always lactic city, headaches, vomits. Whenever we used to have to do that, I'd dread it. It's probably the hardest session I've ever done, but I think it spoke more to my personality rather than my running ability.
Well, it certainly loops back to, one of those insights you said earlier. You just love to physically challenge yourself.
Yeah. So, but that was, very hard, very, very hard.
You're listening to Millie Clark, Australian Olympic marathoner and dietitian, sharing around career highs, lows and learnings. If you missed last week's episode, it was an expert edition featuring Associate Professor Claire Minahan. The topic, considerations for the female athlete. And boy oh boy, has it been extremely popular. Here's a little snippet of Associate Professor Claire Minahan's share-ins.
While we once thought, as you said, disordered eating was part of the female athlete triad, it certainly doesn't have to be. Disordered eating tends to occur in those aesthetic sports. There's diving, gymnastics, but also in endurance sports, those that require particular body weights, such as lightweight rowing, some boxing categories, other fighting categories, for instance, where you have to reach a certain weight. We look to see how that might affect health, well-being and performance.
To tune into the full episode 179, an expert edition, be sure to jump over to wherever it is that you enjoy your podcast from. And whilst there, feel free to peruse the archives, the expert editions, interest editions, featured performers and coaches' corners, and divulge yourself of the sharing of the guests' highs, lows and learnings. For now, let's jump back with Australian Olympic marathoner Millie Clark on this featured performer episode. Millie Clark, here's a hard question for you. If you had to boil everything you've learnt to date through your running career to date into one piece of advice for the listeners of this show to help them perform at their physical best, no matter what the endeavour, what would Millie Clark's solitary piece of advice be?
Look, slow and steady wins the race. I think everyone's too, I guess, in a rush to be the best or perform the best, and you're not really respecting the time that your body takes to adapt. Everyone always wants to be their best straight away, and I think your time will come, but you got to put in the hard work and just be consistent, just slowly. Even in terms of racing, I think slow and steady wins the race. Not necessarily running slow, but pacing yourself properly. I just think it applies to so many, situations that I just love that saying. I used to love that story when I was a kid of the tortoise and the hare. So, that's something that I just try to live by. That your time will come, but just be patient, really.
Ah, wow, the P word, patience, and something I've been thinking about in my work professionally, in my own recreational running, Millie, is just that concept that anything in life, it's not my saying, I think it was Bill Gates originally, we overestimate what we can do in 12 months, but we underestimate what we can do with continued effort across 10 years. And I think it's really true with our running as well.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I learned at uni, it takes 10,000 hours to be considered an expert at anything. And I've run a lot, but I don't think I've run for 10,000 hours yet. So, I've still got a lot more to do, and I think it's about the long game, and I want to be around for a while, so I'd rather just get there in a slow and timely fashion rather than kind of burst onto the scene and then be burnt out and run down and be a nobody by 3 or 4 years. So I'm just trying to learn to love being patient.
Ah, gosh, what a learned skill. Well done. I think you're wise beyond your years, Millie. Millie, talking about the long game, what is coming up next for you, and where can we follow the journey?
Yeah, I haven't decided on my next marathon yet. Thinking maybe early Feb, January next year. But short term, I've got doing the City to Bay next weekend in Adelaide. That's a bit short for me, but it'll be good just to be back out racing. And then I'm going to go over to Flagstaff with Philo and the rest of my squad in October, November, and hopefully run a half marathon maybe November off the back of that, and then just, I don't know, maybe try and work on that 10K speed of mine and see what, marathon comes about early next year, and fingers crossed that, I'm on the team for Tokyo, but yeah, we'll see.
Well, there's that P word being exercised again. It's a very wise, measured approach, Millie. So, and if we want to follow your journey, Millie, you're over on social media?
Yeah, look, I'm not the biggest Facebook user, but I do love my Instagram. It's just Millie Jane 14. I don't post a lot. I'm always on there just having a good old stalk of somebody or having a look, or I do like to share what I'm up to on occasion. So yeah.
And I have to ask, who are you stalking on Instagram?
Oh, I don't know. I don't even know how. You know how you start with one picture and then it leads to somebody else, it leads to somebody else, it leads to somebody else, and then the next minute you're like looking at some, I don't know, Ethiopian who's living in Bangladesh, and you're like, well, how did I get here? I just like looking at old friends, mostly from like uni or back at school. You're like, oh, I remember you, and it's just fun to see what other people are up to these days.
It is. It's a lot of fun. And Millie, professionally, if listeners wanted to reach out and engage with you professionally with your work as a dietitian, where can they and how can they best do that?
I work out of a clinic down in Launceston, Tasmania. It's called Physio TAS, and I do consults on the phone, online. Most of my clients I have got are, over on the mainland or down in Hobart, and I do all those via Skype, which that's the beauty of dietetics, Unlike physios, we don't need to physically touch you or like be around you. We can just chat via email and phone and Skype. So that's how you can find me. Physio TAS.
Yeah, brilliant. And we'll tag all that up in the show notes. And finally, Millie, you've been very generous with your time, and listeners, Millie had to relocate from her accommodation in Canberra to a cafe there, and I think you've done very well. And you're sitting outside in the cold there in Canberra, right?
No, actually, it's quite mild. And the other day it was like 21. It was shirts off, and so I was like, oh my goodness, tan, sun. Yes.
Well, it's warm for compared to Tasmania, I guess, right?
Oh yeah, look, anywhere's warm compared to Tasmania. Not all of us are fortunate enough to live on the Gold Coast where it's like 20 all year round. So
yeah, I won't tell you what it is today. But Millie, finally, finish this sentence. The most important thing in life is
to have fun.
Millie Clark, well done. All the best for the years ahead.
Yeah, cool. Thanks so much.
So there you have it, another episode of the Physical Performance Show, and I hope and I trust you enjoyed today's episode featuring Millie Clark. If you did, then please jump over and let Millie know. You'll find Millie over on Instagram at MillieJane14. That's MILLYJANE14. Don't forget, you'll also find Millie at Physio TAS for any dietetics consultations. Simply look up Physio TAS, TAS. If you're looking to include the Physical Performance Show in your social media posts, then it's simple, at the Physical Performance Show. And if you're doing so, consider a podsy. That's a screenshot of the episode that you're enjoying and tagging in the show. If you'd like to issue feedback or a comment to myself, I'm readily available over on Instagram or Twitter at Brad_beer. Also contactable via email b.beer@pogophysio.com.au. A massive thanks, as always, to you, the show listener, for spreading the word about the Physical Performance Show. The show is going from strength to strength, and that is a massive thank you to you, the faithful listener. If you know someone in your world who would enjoy today's episode, then please consider sharing the episode with them. Please also consider, if you've been enjoying the show for a period of time, jumping over to iTunes and leaving a rating or possibly even a review. Reviews are really great feedback, and they're also a lot of fun to read through. A massive thank you this week to show listener Tom Ando. Now, I recently ran into Tom at an event, and he excitedly told me that he'd been tuning into the show for quite some time. Tom's a passionate recreational runner from Ipswich. So Tom, thank you for your support and your comments. Keep up the great work, Brad, and thanks for sharing such useful and inspiring content. Tom, thank you for taking the time to leave that review. A massive thanks, as always, to the great folk who make this show possible week in, week out. Daryl Misson, our audio engineer, Susan Wilkin, all things show administration, Matthew Walding, all things graphic design, and Oliver Crossley, assisting behind the scenes. Another huge thanks to today's show sponsor, Physio Podcasts are free to download, however, they are not free to produce. So Physio thank you for your support. And don't forget, take advantage of Physio 20% off offer by jumping over to physiocrem.com.au to redeem 20% off any product in the store. Now, coming up on next week's episode of the Physical Performance Show, we pop the Expert Edition hat back on, and I'll bring you a conversation that I recently had with leading Brisbane-based orthopaedic surgeon Patrick Weinrau. Dr. Weinrau is an orthopaedic surgeon who exclusively manages hip joint disorders in adults. He's garnered a reputation in particular for helping active, sporty people through his interventions in being able to maintain high levels of function in their sporting and lifestyle recreational pursuits. And with hip pain being such a limiting factor for so many people and also athletes of all levels, this was an important topic to take a deep dive into. At the time of recording, Patrick was on the eve of leaving Australia to climb the Matterhorn. So Patrick himself knows what it's like to perform at his physical best and to push himself. And it's that unique insight into human function that I believe gives him such an incredible insight into the professional work he does as an orthopedic surgeon. So next week, we discuss all things common hip disorders, osteoarthritis of the hip. We myth bust some of the common beliefs around the hip joint, take an anatomy deep dive, and Patrick issues a fantastic physical challenge. Here's a little snippet of Dr. Patrick Weinrau, next week's upcoming guest.
The longer that someone has degenerative joint disease, the more it starts to wear. So again, going back to the car tyre analogy, it is slowly wearing over time. Many people, in fact, they can develop quite significant degenerative joint disease without actually having any pain.
So be sure to be tuning in next week for the Expert Edition. Until then, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer, and this has been the Physical Performance Show.